A video of President Joe Biden wandering listlessly at the G7 summit in Italy made global headlines last week. It appears to show a confused commander-in-chief drifting aimlessly away from world leaders until Italy's Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, retrieves him. Liberal media outlets scream misinformation as their longer clip, taken from a different angle, shows him giving a thumbs up to 3 parachutists who were taking part in the ceremony. On that, at least, they might have a point. But they're also missing the real point. This wasn't Joe Biden's first offence of this kind. He attended a fundraiser in Los Angeles this weekend with former President Obama and celebrities like Jimmy Kimmel. This is how it ended.
I had to mute the audio because they're playing some music here, but if you enjoyed this video as we get into it, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Consider sharing the video. Appreciate you guys being here. Now, let's continue.
It looks pretty clear that the president has kind of frozen. Doesn't seem to know where he is or what he's doing. His predecessor as the last Democrat president, Barack Obama, has to lead him off stage by the arm, as if he's taking him home for tea in a nursing home. And many think that's where he should now belong rather than the White House. There is no disinformation or selective editing about that last clip. There's no disinformation or selective editing in the scores of videos we see of Biden's physical and apparent cognitive disintegration every week. Barely a day passes by without a fresh clip of him slurring himself into an inaudible cul-de-sac, or forgetting how to exit a stage, or just falling over. After watching that clip, I posted on X what I suspect everyone who watched it was thinking. Embarrassing. The Democrats can't let this go on, surely. Within a few hours, more than 8 million people had viewed the post, and many thousands had liked, responded, or commented on it. The vast majority shared my honestly held view that Joe Biden is sadly too physically and mentally unfit to function at the extremely high level required to be leader of not just the United States, but also leader of the free world. When the last Democrat to occupy the White House has to literally grab the current one because he notices he's having another senior moment and appears to be paralyzed on stage, there has to be a wake-up call that everyone in the party should urgently heed before it's too late. Well, I couldn't agree more. Biden is supposed to be America's commander-in-chief at what is a very dangerous time for the world. But frankly, I wouldn't trust him now to order a restaurant meal, let alone a military strike. Aging is relative. Only one of the candidates repeatedly forgets where he is, or struggles to walk up the stairs, or keeps falling over. Democrats love to go on about cultist Trump supporters wearing MAGA-coloured glasses. Well, I'm not MAGA. Even Donald Trump knows that. It may be time that they admitted their president is now unfit to serve and began a serious conversation about how America and the world should deal with that. Well, joining me now to debate this are 3 ferocious commentators from the political right, left and centre. Cenk Uygur, the founder and host of The Young Turks, host of Tommy Lehrer is Fearless on Outkick, Tommy Lehrer, and the commentator and author of the upcoming book Shameless, Brian Tyler Cohen. Welcome to all 3 of you. Tommy, let me start with you. I watched that clip with Obama and Biden on stage, and I thought that was a really sad moment. You can spin it any way you like, but Obama noticed Biden wasn't really moving and didn't seem now to be quite aware where he was, and literally grabbed his arm and steered him away off stage. It was just a sobering thing to watch. What did you make of it?
Well, this amounts to elder abuse at this point, in my opinion, and shame on Jill Biden for not stepping in when her husband is clearly failing. But I would also say this, something that former President Barack Obama has that current President Joe Biden doesn't have is he does have his mental acuity and faculties, and Barack Obama knows that the optics of him grabbing Joe's arm probably wouldn't be great, but he also understands that the alternative would be to let Joe stand there and freeze. So to me, it's more telling when you look at former President Obama and his actions than looking at Joe Biden. So for all of the Democrat influencers, many of whom are paid by Biden PACs, who want to say that that video was somehow misinformation or disinformation, well, it's clear as day what we saw in that clip. You can't dispute it. And Barack Obama grabbing his arm, I think even further proves that point, that Joe Biden froze, or he was about to freeze, or he was about to maybe do something even more embarrassing, and the former president had to intervene, even though that in and of itself looked bad. There's no way to spin this, guys.
Well, let's see if there is a way to spin it. Brian Tyler Cohen. I mean, look, I'm not MAGA, I'm not Republican, I'm not right-wing. I'm a kind of old-fashioned liberal of the Bill Maher variety, who also has been expressing his concern about what is happening with Joe Biden. So to dismiss it all when people point out what's going on with Biden as just a MAGA plot is demonstrably untrue.
I just wanted to cut in real quick and let you know to prepare yourself for some intense Trump derangement syndrome. Although this is a fantastic debate, this guy on the right, which is a disgrace to people named Tyler, is about to spout off all of the Democrat mainstream media talking points of why we shouldn't like Trump. But Piers Morgan, who is not MAGA, doesn't back down. And here, I'm going to let you watch this because this is amazing.
Piers, thank you for having me, first of all. Second of all, I was literally in the room. I was there. I was at that event at the Peacock Theater at LA Live. Joe Biden was doing what he always does, which is just waving at the crowd. He has a long history of working rope lines ad nauseum. During the State of the Union, he was in that room talking to people so long that the C-SPAN cameras literally turned off. And that's what he was doing on that stage. He was just waving at people who were waving back at him, to the point where Barack Obama came around and just put his arm around Joe, his own vice president, and they walked off stage together, probably because Barack Obama had less of an interest in staying and waving at the crowd as long as Joe Biden did. But this is who Joe Biden is. With that said, I understand why people like Tommy Lahren and the right more broadly have a vested interest in perpetuating this idea that Joe Biden is in the throes of cognitive decline.
Yeah, but I don't have one, Brian. I don't have that vested interest. And I had an amazing call from Joe Biden out of the blue. But I can tell you two things. In that conversation, he was incredibly open and honest with me about it all. It went on for about 15 minutes. But he was also lucid. He was eloquent. He was articulate. And it was a perfectly normal conversation. It bore no relation to what Joe Biden now talks like or acts like when I see him in public. And I would go back even further, and I would say this is more unsettling, which is in 1986, there's a clip on YouTube where Joe Biden's a senator, and he gives an absolutely ferocious onslaught against apartheid in South Africa in a Senate hearing. And it was all televised.
What disturbs me more than the policy that you call a policy is the rationale for the policy. The rationale for the policy. You set out 4 principles that you adhere to, and then and I will go over them in a moment. Then you say on page 14, we must not become part of South Africa's problem. We must remain part of their solution. We must not aim to impose ourselves, our solutions, our favorites in South Africa. Damn it, we have favorites in South Africa. The favorites in South Africa are the people who are being repressed by that ugly white regime. We have favorites. Our loyalty is not to South Africa, it's to South Africans. And the South Africans are majority black, and they are being excoriated. It is not to some stupid puppet government over there.
If y'all are enjoying this video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps me out.
And if you compare that man to what we now see and hear, there is literally no comparison. It is clear evidence before you that this fast-talking, eloquent, loquacious, fiercely intelligent senator from 86 is now a shadow of that man. And I don't say that gleefully. Like I say it sadly, but it's obvious.
Piers, everybody ages. Joe Biden has obviously aged.
But we're not all president of the United States, are we?
Is he as fast as he used to be? Of course not. But here's what I would offer in rebuttal to that is we're sitting here wondering if Joe Biden has the ability to do the job that he is literally doing right now and doing more effectively than any president in our lifetime.
Why is his poll rating so terrible then?
Piers, is he too old to have added 15 million jobs to the economy? Is he too old to have reached our stock market to a record high? Is he too old to have brought inflation down to its target 3%? Is he too old to have brought wages up to exceed inflation? Is he too old to have signed the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act, the gun safety bill? All of these things, he is this old.
If he's so great, why is his approval rating at a record low? Why is he now losing in most polls in almost all the swing states? And why are alarm bells? Well, I'd say 1/3 thing. Why are 2/3 of Democrats also of the belief he's too old to carry on with the job? And when you put all that together, why do you want him to run? It might be the only way you lose.
Respectfully, Piers, I would argue that the reason that this is such a top of mind issue is because we have media like this right now, like Fox News in the United States, like Newsmax, like OAN,
But
who
I'm
are
not right
perpetuating
wing.
this idea relentlessly.
I'm not right wing, Brian. That's your problem.
because-
The Achilles heel is I'm literally not conservative. Everybody knows that. So you can say
But we're
shows like this, but I'm literally
But we're having
not,
this conversation.
I'm not of the right,
Piers,
so it doesn't work.
Piers, we're having this conversation, and this conversation is that drum is beat relentlessly in the United States because it's used as a distraction to not talk about the accomplishments.
All right, let me go to Cenk. You've been waiting patiently.
Okay, Piers, I would.
Yeah, Tommy, quickly, yeah.
Piers, I would just want to interject real quickly because I have to say this. Brian, there is nothing I would love more than for the Democrats to stick with Joe Biden as their nominee. I have no dog in this fight. I hope you guys run Joe because I think he's the easiest candidate to beat. So when you say, oh, it's us that are trying to make it seem like he's old. No, if you leave the guy in, it's much easier for my guy to beat him, okay? I think what the writing on the wall is you're going to swap him out. You being the Democrat Party, you're going to swap him out. I'm far more concerned about a different Democrat being the nominee against Donald Trump. I hope that Joe Biden is your nominee. So any dog that you think I have in this fight of beating the drum that he's old, no, Brian, I just have eyes and ears, and I am lucid enough to understand what I'm seeing. I just wanted to make that point.
Okay.
Which is a fantastic point, and I'll ask you guys, do you think Joe Biden will actually be the candidate that runs this year on this ticket, or do you think that the Democrats will replace him as she just proposed?
Cenk, I mean, I think you and I we've talked about this before. This has to be a concern, doesn't it, for America?
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually very depressing on a number of fronts, including that my side, the Democrats, have now become like MAGA. Sorry, Brian, I love you. I think you're a great guy, super smart. You lay out your case as well as anybody can lay it out. But we do all have eyes and ears. And the Democrats are starting to look like MAGA, denying that, MAGA says, oh, Trump won the election in 2020. You have to be a lunatic to believe that. But if you think that Joe Biden is a secret dynamo behind the scenes, as the Democrats claim, you got to be borderline lunatic to believe that. No, the guy is in terrible, terrible shape. And if he has dementia, they get more stubborn. And so what if he digs in and he's like, I don't care. And his mind is actually affected by the ailments that we're seeing with our own eyes. So the Democrats have become so authoritarian that they're like, oh my God, what if Bernie Sanders wins? What if a progressive wins? Let's all bow our head to the Mad King. And that's what he is at this point. So we have two Mad Kings running. One's a moron to begin with. Donald Trump's one of the dumbest people who's ever been in political office. And now his brain is melting too. He's saying, oh, you do look at Joe Biden, he has dementia. My doctor, Ronnie Johnson, he told me it's Ronnie Jackson. You idiot.
Yeah,
so
but Cenk,
we have two blithering morons
Cenk, on
and
that
people
point,
that are affected by mental ailments running for office.
But Cenk, here's
it's
the
a
difference.
deeply embarrassing moment for America.
Here's the difference. I've watched a lot of Trump recently. He rang me a couple of months ago. We had a long chat. And he sounded completely normal. Exactly the same as he sounded when I did Celebrity Apprentice back in 2008. Honestly, he could have been exactly the same guy. Trump's never had a drink, never had a cigarette, never had a drug. For all that people think of him, he's still basically the same guy he's always been. Now, he free rolls.
I don't think so.
Well, hang on. Well, he free rolls in the way he speaks. And you can go back and watch him. I used to watch him over the boardroom on Apprentice night after night. And he'd say lots of stuff, and some of it wouldn't stack up to a fact check, and some of it didn't sound quite right. But I would say there's been no cognitive decline in Trump, that he's always been basically the same kind of guy. He's a little bit older, but when you think he's only 3 years younger than Biden, my God, I mean, the difference between the two of them. And as I thought Bill Ackman, the very good point he made, Warren Buffett's in his 90s. And he doesn't sound anything like the way Joe Biden does. It's not about his age. It's about his mental acuity.
Thank you all. God bless you all. Let's go lick the world. Let's get it done.
I'll lead an effective strategy to mobilize true and international effort to pressure. Mobilize true and international effort to pressure.
And I just think, I tell you when the chickens come home to roost for everybody trying to defend this or trying to make some equivalence with Trump. June the 27th, these two guys are going to get on a stage in a live television debate that will break all records, I think, for ratings, probably around the world. And you know what's going to happen? Over 90 minutes, however long it is, Donald Trump is going to take Joe Biden to pieces. And it's going to be utterly, utterly humiliating for the president, because he has been protected so carefully in his term of office from this kind of thing. And when he gets exposed, honestly, Cenk, I think it's going to be utterly humiliating, and Trump will destroy him.
Well, Piers, there's a reason why the debate is historically early. The debates are never before the convention. I think the Democrats put the debate before the convention so they'll have one last moment to try to talk Joe Biden out of this race. Because I disagree with you slightly on Trump. I think he's always had the lowest IQ of any human being that's ever been in public. But I think he's lost a couple of points. So he went from like a 20 to a 15. He's way, way below Biden. But I get it. He looks energetic. Biden looks like, I mean, come on, guys. The emperor has no clothes. They hate me for telling people that the emperor has no clothes, but my job is in news. We all can see how incredibly old he is. So my point is, for God's sake, pull him. If you don't pull him, we're going to lose to Trump. Why do you want to lose to Trump? Why do you want to give up 10 points? Hate me all you want. And every Democrat says it's my fault. It's people, oh, no, you shouldn't tell people reality. They already see it. You've got to pull him if you want to beat Trump. If you don't want to pull Joe Biden, you're saying, I don't mind losing to Trump. I don't mind losing democracy. All the things that I said about Trump, I don't actually mean it. I don't think it's a big deal if he wins. That's why I'm running this guy who cannot move or speak. It's absolute madness.
Even Trump derangement syndrome, Trump hating Cenk Uygur, I think I'm saying his name right, agrees that Joe Biden should not be running, that the public opinion of Joe Biden is that he is an old man who is basically being abused by his family in the version of elderly abuse, to be strolled up there in his corporeal form, I believe is how they worded it going into the 2020 election, that, you know, the Democrat establishment said, Joe Biden, just stay alive long enough to make it to the 2020 election so that we can use you in your corporeal form to beat Trump, because they thought that Joe Biden was the only person that actually had the chance.
I'm going to come to Tom in a moment, but I want to just come to Brian on one point, which is, like I said, there have been two incumbent Democrat presidents since the war who both gave up. They both resigned before the next election. Lyndon Johnson was one and Harry S. Truman was the other. Did it for slightly different reasons, but the bottom line was that they didn't want to go through with it, and they were persuaded by grandees in the party on both cases that this was the right thing to do for the party and for the country. Why is no one having that conversation with Joe Biden? I mean, you've put up a good defense, but when you have someone like Cenk, who is a Democrat, who's at his absolute wit's end, because he sees through all this stuff, it's just smoke and mirrors. We can all see what we see with our own eyes. Biden can barely move. He just shuffles now. I don't understand most of what comes out of his mouth. It is incredibly sad. So my question is, why is no one at least having that conversation in the party? And secondly, if he does get completely torpedoed at the debate, which I think is highly likely, then who would you also like to see potentially being considered to replace him, hypothetically, if it comes to it?
I think the reason that he's not being replaced is because in moment after moment, whether it's any of these elections, he is defying the odds. In 2022, in the midterms, Democrats won. Everybody counted Joe out, and he won. This happened as early as the 2020 election itself. I mean, this has been a recurring theme where Joe Biden has consistently defied the odds. And that was on the backdrop of everybody, you know, from Tommy to Cenk. I can't actually say that. I don't know whether Cenk was writing Joe Biden off back in 2020, but you know, writing him off in terms of him not being able to win, in terms of him not being able to push forward his agenda, and he's done it successfully. I mean, you know, for all of the issues that Cenk has with Biden, I think that he would be the last person to take issue with the fact, you know, with the breadth of his accomplishments while he was in office, whether it was, you know, the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Gun Safety Bill, the Infrastructure Law, the PACT Act, the CHIPS Act. I think there is the fact that he keeps doing what everybody says that he can't do, whether it's winning elections, whether it's presiding over a Democratic Party that is winning elections, or whether it's actually pushing his agenda forward or adding jobs, doing all of the things that Donald Trump said he would do, whether it's lowering healthcare costs, adding 15 million jobs, passing an infrastructure bill. He's doing the things that the other guy promised he would do, that energetic guy promised he would do and failed. And yet Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe from the campaign, is actually getting them done.
Okay,
so why would he step back?
Okay, but if he did, just before I go to
Can I
Tommy,
answer that?
if he did, well, hypothetically though, Brian, just give me a name of somebody who you would be pleased to see step into the breach if it came to it. If you resigned.
It's not going to matter. I'm not going to deal in like non-existent scenarios. Joe Biden is running. He is going to be the nominee. And so
I think you're going to have to consider it sooner or later.
This guy is suffering from loser denial. He's stumbling all over his words. Tommy is barely containing herself from cracking up. And Cenk has a million things to say in rebuttal to what he just claimed, which he'll get his opportunity here in a minute after Piers speaks.
I'll bring Tommy in. I mean, Tommy, look, there's no doubt Joe Biden beat Donald Trump in 2020. Donald Trump doesn't want to admit it, but as I said to him to his face, he hasn't produced any evidence to me which stacks up, which said he had that election stolen. He just lost. And he has, very bad midterms to Republicans and Trump. He had a very, Trump's record really electorally in the last 4 or 5 years has been awful. So, other than the 2016 fantastic win, is there not a little concern for you, particularly given all the criminal indictments, the fact he's now a convicted felon? I happen to think the Stormy Daniels case was preposterous and should never have happened, but he is a convicted felon. That is going to have an impact probably on some independents and some Republicans potentially. Are you not as worried as some are about Donald Trump's own candidacy here, and that maybe he ought to consider his position?
Well, listen, I never underestimate Democrats. So one thing I will give Democrats is that they are very strategic and they know the voting process better than any political party in the world. They know how to get out the vote. It's something that I'm quite frankly jealous of, because you guys know how to register voters. You guys know how to get out those mail-in ballots. You know how to early vote. You know how to ballot harvest. You do a great job on the Democrat side of the process. So your messenger doesn't matter as much because your process is fantastic, and I hope that we emulate it on the Republican side. So I will give the Democrat Party that. But I believe the reason that we lost in the 2022 midterms that were supposed to be a red wave was really for one reason and one reason only, and that was Roe v. Wade, and that was the abortion issue, something that I've been warning Republicans about for many years now, and I will continue to sound that alarm. That is the thing that lost it in 2022, and if Republicans are not careful with their messaging, that is what will lose suburban women that are right on the cusp between Joe Biden and Donald Trump in November. It will be the abortion issue. So that is something that I've been very, very honest about, and the Republican side need to get better at it. I think Donald Trump has done a good job of saying this is where it lies with the states. But Donald Trump is a candidate. I'm not worried about Donald Trump because Donald Trump is raising money. Donald Trump's base is stronger than ever. Joe Biden can't even get his base excited. You heard Cenk saying that he's not excited about Joe Biden. You'd be hard pressed to find a Republican that's not excited about Donald Trump. His base is still there. So no, I'm not worried. I will say this though, if Republicans don't get their process right, it's still going to be a close election no matter what. And if they swap Joe out, which I think they're going to, it's going to be even more tricky. I'm very realistic about that.
Before I go to Cenk to respond, is there a name on the Democrat side, Tommy, that you would actually have some fear about?
For me, I'm very concerned about California Governor Gavin Newsom, and that's who I think the nominee is going to be. Not because I think Gavin Newsom is a great leader, quite the opposite, but he's young, he's a shiny new toy, he's charismatic, he's well-spoken, he's like a white Barack Obama. So yes, Gavin Newsom does give me cause for pause, and I've been sounding the alarm. Don't underestimate Gavin Newsom.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to me because I believe he was the mayor of San Francisco at one point, and San Francisco went downhill under him. Then he became the governor of California, and California has gone downhill ever since. Remember the lockdowns? We see rampant criminal migrants flooding into California, getting benefits on the taxpayer dollars. This $20 an hour minimum wage that he just implemented that has cost and shut down multiple businesses because they just can't afford it. But I mean, that's what Democrats do, right? They fell upwards.
Okay, let's go to Cenk. Cenk, first of all, your response to what they've just been saying.
Yeah. So first of all, to answer Brian's earlier question, by election day, I thought that Joe Biden would crush Donald Trump in 2020. He actually won by less than I thought he would because I was reading the polls, and I was right about the overall popular vote count. I was surprised at how close the swing states were. And that's because Joe Biden at that point had a 52% approval rating. And I base things not on my emotions, but on facts and numbers. Do you want to know what his approval rating is now? It's 37%. It's 15 points lower. There is no one who understands one thing about politics who doesn't think, oh, a guy who's 15 points lower than he was has just as good a chance of winning. Remember, he barely won the swing states last time by 44,000 votes. He has no chance of winning. No one in the 30s, an incumbent in American history, has ever won re-election. Ever. It's never been done. And we're to believe that the guy who could barely talk and speak is going to pull off the most miraculous comeback in American political history. Sorry, but that's just denying reality. And unlike apparently every other Democratic establishment person, I don't want to lose to Trump. But apparently they don't mind losing to him at all. You'd be mental to run a guy at 37% approval. Incumbency is an albatross around his neck, so is his age, etc. So if you don't want to beat Trump, fine. You raise your hand and say, I love authoritarian leadership. I bow in front of the Democratic establishment. I will never defy you. I bow to you. I bow to you. It doesn't matter if you roll out a mad king with no clothes. I'll say he has clothes, and I don't mind losing to Trump. So if you go to who should replace him, first of all, anyone. Give me any random Democratic governor that you pull out of a hat, and that person will have 10-point higher.
But who's the best? Who's the best
Joe
potential?
Biden, and we'll have a great chance at beating Donald Trump for the reason that Brian is talking about. Because the Republicans hate women who have freedom. They don't want women to have freedom. They want to snatch your body away and say that's the government's property. And they believe in giant big government and the jackbooted thugs of the government coming and snatching women's bodies and saying, you can't have contraception, you can't have an abortion, you got to do whatever the man says. So I'm never going to vote for a Republican. It's a sick party. But I also don't want
just
to
on that point,
lose to
Cenk,
them like
Cenk,
morons.
Cenk, just across the pond here, I would observe that on the Democrat progressive side, they think that it's perfectly okay to just completely destroy women's rights at the altar of limitless gender identity, to the extent we have biological males
Piers.
crushing women. Well, I know, I'm just saying. I'm just saying
you know
when I
how
hear
many people
Democrats,
that affects,
listen,
no, Piers,
listen,
let me explain.
let me finish.
That affects 0.00001%. You guys are obsessed with beating up on trans people. It barely affects anyone in the country. It's a giant distraction. Meanwhile, women are 51% of this country, and you don't mind Republicans taking away their freedom completely and saying that their body is the property of the U.S. government?
I find it slightly weird when I hear people on the one hand ferociously wanting to defend women's rights, but on the other hand quite happy to see those rights traduced by things like allowing biological males to compete in sport or allowing biological males to be in female spaces, whatever it may be.
Piers,
I'm sorry, you may not think
Piers,
it's important.
No, you're being ridiculous.
I'm not being ridiculous. I'm not.
And I'll tell you why. Because Piers, on trans women competing in professional sports, I actually agree with you. But you know who that affects? About 7 people in the country. To pretend that that's a real issue,
that's completely
not
wrong.
a real issue.
No,
that's
Cenk,
a culture war issue
Cenk, it's
meant
not.
to divide and create hate.
We're seeing it in more and more.
It's meant to cover up Republican crimes as they snatch away women's bodies and say, you're going to have a rapist child. That's what Republicans actually believe. And you go, oh, wait, look at that distraction. 7 people are involved in a sport they shouldn't be involved in. Wow, what a big deal.
Cenk, I agree with you about abortion. I'm pro-choice for women on abortion. I think I'm the only consistent person in this conversation because I defend women's rights across the board. I'm not picky and choosy about what rights I'm prepared to defend and not defend.
Okay, whatever.
And if you think that, if you honestly think only 7 people are affected by the transport thing, and it's got nothing to do with trans people, I want
think
them.
It's more than. Hey, are you saying it's in the thousands? Are you saying that there's thousands of trans women competing in professional sports?
No, but
are you saying it's hundreds?
No, but
are you talking about dozens or single digits?
It is
a microscopic issue that you are choosing to focus on.
Here's why you're wrong.
Like to push that bigotry.
Here's why you're wrong. Right across the board, from when little girls compete at school now, to high school, to college, to potentially professional sport. If you do not stop trans athletes competing against women, it will destroy women's sport. More and more sports are seeing it happening.
Get back to reality.
It is reality.
So Piers,
it's happening.
Who should replace him?
It's happening.
I don't care. I don't care. Piers,
well, you should care.
The funny thing is, I actually agree with you, but I don't care.
Okay.
It affects so little people. It's an obvious distraction. You
wouldn't be saying. You would not be saying that.
Trump?
Well, I agree.
How do we beat Trump?
Yeah, okay, we'll come to that.
Trump?
But just to be clear, it affects a lot more people than you think, that issue. And if you were a mother or a father of a young girl, very promising athlete, whose Olympic place is stolen by a trans athlete who has an unfair advantage, you would not feel the way you do.
At this point, after listening to what Cenk just had to say, if you're a parent of a little girl that had to compete, was forced to compete with a biological little boy, you've spent hundreds or thousands of dollars on that sport, on her training, on her equipment, on in time, spending weekends at games or competitions. There's no reason at this point. He just said it. He does not care. Why would you then vote for a Democrat ever again? Furthermore, if you're one of these, women who have grown up in that and you have had your opportunities taken by a biological male, you should also never vote for a Democrat again. It's pretty plain and simple. The only way of preventing this from continuing is to vote for a Republican. That means voting for Donald Trump, and that means voting Republican down ticket. These people will tell you right to your face that you're wrong, that your expense, that your time, that your effort, that your money, that everything, your blood, sweat, and tears don't matter. And as these little girls grow up and they try to earn college scholarships, are these women's scholarships going towards biological males now? And if they're not now, I'm willing to bet that in the future they certainly will, especially looking at the landscape at universities nowadays.
This literally happened to maybe 2 people on planet Earth.
Shouldn't be happening to anybody.
Maybe.
Right.
2
anyway,
out of 8 billion people.
Is Gavin Newsom the right guy?
No. Give me a boring Democrat. So Gavin Newsom has issues in California. He's slick. He's one of the elites. For God's sake, Democratic Party, when are you going to realize that people hate the establishment? Why do you keep appointing and picking the most establishment candidates in the world? So I know you're never going to pick the guy who would easily win. If you put in Bernie Sanders right now, he'd win in a landslide. But I know, the Democrats hate that idea more than the Republicans do. Republicans, you don't have to worry about it.
Bernie Sanders could not win a general
progressives. Okay, but give me Gretchen Whitmer, give me Josh Shapiro, give me Andy Beshear, give me Pritzker, give me any random, boring, bland Democrat, and they're going to beat the lunatic named Donald Trump, and they're going to beat a party who hates women's freedoms and wants to end women's freedoms in this country and has ended women's freedoms in this country. It's so easy to beat the Republicans and Trump. The only guy who can't beat him is a guy sitting at 37%. Why are we choosing to lose to Trump?
Well, Brian, let me ask Brian that question.
And I know the answer, by the way. Joe Biden is why we're losing.
I had other topics I wanted to discuss, but I've actually really enjoyed this debate. It's fascinating, actually. It's a really interesting kind of existential debate for the parties here. I mean, Brian, what it comes back to for me is this precedent for 2 presidents on the Democrat side stepping aside. And there's clear precedent here that Biden could be number 3 if he can be persuaded to do it. As Cenk just said, it's almost like you've got a death wish, that you've got a guy in Trump, got nearly 100 criminal indictments against him. He's already been convicted on 1 felony. If you can't beat that guy with all the baggage Trump brings with him, then I don't know what it says about the Democrat Party. And all the polls say the biggest impediment to beating him is Joe Biden. Even 2/3 of Democrats think Biden's too old to run again. Your own side. Why do you want to commit this act of self-harm?
Piers, you're speaking as if the election is over. I mean, it's still happening, and we are contending to your exact point. It's not over. I mean, we're contending with somebody who is digging his own grave right now. I mean, you opened up before by talking about how Donald Trump is a convicted felon, how Republicans continue to wage this war against women's reproductive rights. I mean, this is Republicans. You know, they're not presenting themselves well ahead of this election, and most people, by the way, in this country aren't even paying attention right now. When it comes into focus, when Americans start paying attention, when it's not just low information, when it's not just high information voters who are watching right now, the freaks like all of us.
What do you think is going to happen, Brian? What's going to happen on June the 20th?
Everybody knows who Biden and Trump are. Well, everybody knows who Biden and Trump are.
June the 20th.
The idea that they're going to magically turn it.
I come back to this. Brian,
oh my God, is that Donald Trump? Oh my God.
No,
I'm going to vote against.
It's not that they don't know who Donald Trump
the point is we're going to see on June the 27th these two guys standing there. There'll be no Barack Obama to hold Joe Biden's hand and guide him to safety. He's going to be exposed on live national television for however long it is, an hour, 90 minutes, whatever the final time is, I'm not sure. But whatever it is, even 10 minutes at the moment of Biden exposed in that way is proving to be calamitous for him. He's going to get eaten alive by Trump. You know it, I know it, Tommy knows it, Cenk knows it. And to Cenk's point, you can hate Trump with a vengeance like Cenk does. But if you're just going to throw Biden to the wolf, then surely you then deserve all that comes your way, which will be a big election defeat.
The bigger story that's going to happen on June 27th is the fact that the vast majority of Americans, to your point, the most Americans are going to watch this debate, probably of any debate that we've ever had, is they are going to be reminded what a raving lunatic Donald Trump is. This is somebody who, you know, purportedly in his right mind is claiming that World War II hasn't happened yet, in his right mind claiming that Barack Obama is still the president, in his right mind claiming that you need ID to buy bread, in his right mind claiming that the U.S., which is there to as an acronym for United States, spells us, and that he was the first person to figure that out, in his right mind claimed that Nikki Haley was in charge of the Capitol on January 6th, in his right mind claimed that Viktor Orban was the leader of Turkey. I mean, like, this is... What are we talking about here?
Well, Brian, let me answer the question.
Donald Trump's energy.
Let me answer the question for you. Brian, if he's so diabolical, why is he ahead in the polls in most of the swing states?
I agree. The polls right now are look, Piers. What's happening right now in the polls in what is it in June? Before the election is not indicative of what's going to happen. We all know that a lot can change in a few months. Look at what happened in the beginning of January 2020 to the beginning of February 2020. A lot can change in a few months.
All right.
People are going to be reminded of exactly who Donald Trump is,
it's never
why
happened.
They came together, why 81 million Americans came together in 2020 to make sure that he didn't take the presidency. And that was before he incited an insurrection on January 6th. That was before 41 of his 44 cabinet officials and closest advisors opted not to endorse him in this upcoming election. Donald Trump hasn't gotten better. He's gotten worse. The Republican Party hasn't gotten better. It's gotten worse. We see this in election after election when people actually cast their ballots versus just the polls. When people are actually going to the polls and casting ballots, we constantly see a different story being told than the one that we hear from the media over and over and over on repeat prior to these elections actually happening.
All right. Final word to
Piers,
you, Tommy.
can I tell you who the number one person who's guilty of all this is?
Yes.
And the reason why we're in this mess? It's Dr. Jill Biden. So if you ask, hey, has anybody in the administration talked to Joe Biden about stepping down? Yes. Has Barack Obama gone and had lunch with him several times? And the reporting is that he likely asked him to step down. Yes. Has Axelrod and Carville been all over TV asking Biden to step down? And they're the top proxies for the Clintons and the Obamas. Yes. The one person who apparently wants to keep going is Jill Biden, the First Lady. So, okay, so we're all stuck because Jill Biden would like a second term and she thinks that would be better for his legacy, her legacy. And so now we're all stuck because one person thinks, I don't care if he has dementia or whatever he has, I want to stay on to power. And that's a real problem in this country. So I'm
listen,
sorry. I agree with what Brian is saying about Trump. I agree that he's a madman. I agree, and that's why he should be easy to beat. But Brian, he's 15 points lower than he was in 2020.
Yeah.
You know it's never been done. He's 37%. It's never been done. This guy is not going to pull off a miraculous comeback, and we're all going to suffer for 4 long years because of the egos of Jill and Joe Biden.
Yeah, and you know, when Cenk Uygur and Tommy Lehman agree about something, it's quite a rare occurrence. And you both totally, Tommy, agree about the state of Joe Biden. And I do think there's a slight denial creeping in with a lot of Democrats that they kind of know. They see the same stuff we all see. And to try and pretend we're not seeing a blue sky when it's blue, and to try and tell us, oh, no, it's not, it's green, is to deny the bleeding obvious right before our eyes. But Tommy, let's go forward 5 months, election day. How's this all going to end? I mean, do you think Biden will be the guy that ends up fighting the election, or do you agree with my sense, which is this debate could just throw everything up?
Yeah, you know, and I agree that the reason this debate is so early is because Democrats need time. If he completely bombs, which I expect he will, the Democrats need time to execute their swap out plan, which I've contended they're going to do for the last 2 years. I mean, there is no doubt in my mind that there will be a different Democrat nominee come election day. I think it's either going to happen at the convention or shortly thereafter. Joe Biden will finally be convinced that he must step down because he's simply not even able to stand at that point. And I think they're going to swap him out. It might be Whitmer. I still think it's going to be Gavin Newsom. But I think that if it is Joe Biden, Donald Trump runs away with this election. But I'm a realist. If it's not Joe Biden, I agree that it's going to be much more challenging in the election because the Democrats are so good at the process. So I think it's going to be more challenging if Joe isn't the nominee on the Democrat side. But I still think that Donald Trump, given everything we're seeing in our country, especially that wide open southern border that's literally killing Americans, I do believe Donald Trump's going to win either way, but it's much easier against Joe. So if you guys want to keep pretending he's A-OK, Brian, I'm right there with you. Let's go with that.
Finally, we'll reach a point of complete consensus. Thank you to all my panel. Brilliant debate. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, this one was a bit longer than my typical video, but I just had to share the entire thing because, wow, what a fantastic debate. And what are your guys' thoughts? Will Joe Biden be the name on the ticket that we're voting against in November? Or will it be somebody else? And if you think it'll be somebody else, who's that person that you'll think it'll be? Hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you guys in the next one.